Did you know the narcissist is actually really afraid of you? Now, hear me out. I know that might seem like a strange thing when you're in an abusive relationship and actually thinking about the narcissist being afraid of you, because likely it feels like you are afraid of them. Well, stay tuned through this episode and I'm going to explain exactly why narcissists are actually deeply afraid of you. Hi, my name is Caroline Strawson and I'm a positive psychology, trauma-informed coach and somatic therapist. And my mission in life, literally, genuinely, my purpose is to help people just like yourself move from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth after narcissistic abuse, because it is possible. And I know what it's like, because I've been exactly where you are now, feeling stuck, feeling alone, maybe filled with shame. And it's really important for me that you get educated. You can start to recognize it isn't you, it is not your fault, but the power to heal is in you. It's not necessarily about the narcissist here. The power to heal is in you. So if you're new to my channel, or maybe you've kind of dabbled in some of my episodes, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that bell so you never miss any of my episodes. Because I genuinely think I bring a mixture of neuroscience, a mixture of through a trauma-informed lens, a polyvagal lens, and an internal family systems lens to narcissistic abuse, which I hope really helps you start to understand the concept, the nuances, the complexities of narcissistic abuse as well. So it might seem strange, mightn't it? The narcissist being afraid of you? How does that work out? Well, this really points to exactly what a narcissist is. Now, many of us consider narcissist to be someone who walks into a room, commands attention, really ultra confident. And actually that can be some narcissists. You know, the typical sort of grandiose, malignant narcissist often we see in leaders that are these types of narcissists. But there are actually other types of narcissists. In fact, in my narcissistic trauma-informed coaching certification, I teach that there are 10 different types of narcissists. And for me, one of the most dangerous types are what we call covert narcissists. Now, covert narcissists are really those individuals who act like the victim, and then they have these parts that come up that are abusive. So you might be thinking, Caroline, what are you talking about? Parts, and what does all of that mean? Well, when I was during my healing process, and literally, like I say, I completely retrained to do this work. I used to be a podiatrist. And then having gone through my own divorce from a covert narcissist, I literally retrained so that I could help people like yourself. And I retrained initially with lots of cognitive stuff of how to help people manage the symptoms of how they're feeling. But again, just like myself, it felt like that there was something missing. It felt no matter how much I kept saying, I know what the narcissist is like. I know I shouldn't reply back. I know I shouldn't feel like this. I know I shouldn't react like that. I am a nice person. This is them. No matter what I found myself saying, my body told a different story. So this is when I trained in a huge amount of somatic psychotherapies, things like brain spotting, somatic experiencing, EMDR, and internal family systems. Now, for me, internal family systems, which is an evidence-based parts therapy, completely transformed how I felt about myself and indeed how I saw the narcissist too. Now, internal family system works on the premise that we all have a true self. You've probably heard this phrase before, haven't you? Core self, authentic self, true self. And we all have that part of us. And it's how we are born. It's the essence of who we are. Can't change it. Think of like a cloudy day. If you have a cloudy day outside, it doesn't mean the sun isn't behind those clouds. And that's like the true self. It's always there, even if we're not showing up as our true self sometimes, because there's always a reason. And then due to our own childhood, for whatever reason, and when we talk about trauma, trauma isn't just these massive great things that happen in your childhood, things like childhood abuse, because these things can happen, absolutely. But actually it can be many other things like your parents divorcing, being bullied at school, not being picked for a sports team. All of these have an impact on how you start to feel about yourself, because as children, we need reasons for things. And we don't necessarily look at the other person. My parents are getting a divorce because they don't love each other, they're arguing, and they need to split up. We don't look at it, I'm being neglected because my parent had a really bad childhood and actually doesn't know how to parent. As children, we don't feel or think like that. We always look for a reason, and that reason normally comes back to ourselves. My parents are divorcing because I'm not good enough. I'm being neglected because I'm unlovable. And that is what the trauma is. It's about what we are feeling about ourselves, and that remains literally stuck somatically in our nervous system within our body. This then impacts how we show up as adults, because when we have that deep inner child wound, what happens is, because we are built for survival as human beings, our inner system goes, don't ever want to feel that pain again. I don't want to feel like a 5-year-old not feeling good enough. I don't want to feel like a 7-year-old that's worthless. So our system then has what we call protector parts. Now, we all have different parts of us, just like maybe if you've been asked to go out one night and there's a part of you wants to stay at home and stay nice and cozy, and then there's another part of you that wants to go out. We all have these parts. But the premise using internal family system is these parts take on roles. And these roles can be things like people pleasing. You know, how many of you have a people pleasing protector part? How many of you maybe have a perfectionist protector part? Certainly for me growing up, not feeling like I was good enough, I had a high achieving people pleasing perfectionist. I had this array of protector parts that was trying to stop me from feeling like a not good enough little girl. So if you think of it like a triangle, we have our true self, the essence of who we are. We then have those inner child wounds that occur, which we call exiles in internal family systems. Pain that we just don't want to feel. Our system found it too painful to bear as a child. So these protector parts start to show up for us to try and distract, minimize, move us away from that pain. And that's how we all operate as human beings. Us and the narcissist. So for me, when I think about a narcissist, I don't necessarily medicalize the condition like narcissistic personality disorder, because there's only 9 traits listed in the DSM, which is the Diagnostical Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. And if you think about the narcissist, they don't just have 9 traits, there's loads more. I teach 35 plus in my narcissistic trauma-informed coaching certification, that they can show up in many, many different ways. And if we only think of 9, that means if they're outside of that parameter, does that mean they're not a narcissist? And one of those is even about the fact that they don't have any empathy. And let me tell you, narcissists can fake empathy. In fact, I've got a great video on YouTube. Go and check out how narcissists can fake empathy, because it's really interesting, because there's 3 different types of empathy. And I go through all of that in that particular video for you. So we know then, if we've got these 9 traits, and I see these 9 traits not as traits like listed in the DSM. For me, these are like protector parts. And for me, pretty much everything in the DSM, not everything, but the majority of things in the DSM are really for the health professionals like psychiatrists and psychologists to diagnose people with something based on, oh, yeah, you've got that trait, got that trait, got that trait. Okay, now you have borderline. Now you have bipolar. Now you've got narcissistic personality disorder. Now, the problem being with narcissistic personality disorder here, it means a narcissist needs to think there's something wrong and go in and get a diagnosis. Therein lies the problem immediately for a narcissist, because very, very rarely will they do that. Now, if you look at the DSM, and what comes up time and time again, more and more so in the trauma world, is if you look at these symptoms that are listed in the DSM, the traits for the health professionals to diagnose somebody, if you actually start to look at those, the majority of those are actually protector parts. They're actually symptoms of trauma, but we're labeling them often in this book so that we can give medication to them, or we can give them a label as something. Now, that's not to say labels aren't good, because I talk about narcissist, which is a label. But for me, a narcissist is an individual. So think about it again like the triangle for internal family systems. So just like us, so we all have a true self, like the narcissist, okay? We all have that childhood trauma, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be this major stuff. It can be being picked on at school, someone looking at us not very nicely time and time again. That creates that childhood wound to which those protector parts then start to show up for us as individuals. Now, the problem being with a narcissist is their protector parts of that individual become abusive collectively. So that can be things like gaslighting, coercive control, manipulation. So they still have a self, there's still that childhood wound. And then the protector parts, I like to see it as an umbrella term for an individual's protector parts that become abusive in relationships, professionally, personally, literally in everyday parts of life as well. Now, equally, those of us in relationships with narcissists will have a sense of self, our true self, we'll have a childhood wound, and then we have protector parts. Our protector parts tend to be things like people-pleasing, perfectionism, appeasing, retreating, dissociation, not feeling. So they're different. And we tend to label our then protector parts as a codependent. So labels can be good insofar as it gives us a meaning of how we feel. It gives us a meaning of who that person is so that we can recognize it's not our fault and how we can start to heal. Now, this goes back to then, well, why is the narcissist then so fearful of us? Why are they so scared of who we are then? Why is it simply for being us when we feel like we're the ones going through all of this, that they are scared of us? Well, the reason being is if they're in that relationship with you, think about it. If they're not getting what we call their drug of choice, which is what we call narcissistic supply, meaning if they've got that core inner child wound and they're showing up as their protector parts, they're totally blended with the parts of them. If you are not then behaving in the way that they expect you to behave in when they're showing up as their protector parts, this is triggering then their internal inner child wound. Because let's just say, for instance, they're trying to gaslight you and they're saying you're crazy, you're too sensitive, etc., etc., etc. They're manipulating your mind and saying these things. But let's just say where you start to disagree with them, and normally when you're being gaslit, you end up going silent and you end up thinking, well, maybe it is me, and you start to ask those questions. But let's say you don't on occasion and you actually keep going and you say, oh, actually, no, I don't believe you. I know that happened. This is when the narcissist starts to fear you. Because by nature of you not behaving in the way that they expect you to give them that narcissistic supply when they're showing up as that protector part, that really triggers their core inner child wound. So you will often notice in those moments, and you may be able to relate to this, I'd love to know in the comments below, do you find sometimes that you start to think all of a sudden the narcissist behavior, the abusive behavior starts to increase? And you're kind of wondering, whoa, where's this coming from? And often this can be, especially if you're in a relationship with one and then you end up splitting up. Because when you split up from a narcissist, it doesn't mean, oh, the relationship's over, it's going to be a bit of a shakedown period. No, the abuse often increases, and we call this post-separation abuse, often increases. And in moments, even though it's increased, something might happen and then it increases even more. Why does that happen? Whenever a narcissist behavior escalates to become more abusive, let me tell you, that is the time when they fear you the most, when they are feeling the most pain. Now, I also want to add in here, this is no excuse for their abusive behavior. It isn't. There is no excuse for their abusive behavior. This is an explanation. And the reason why I wanted to explain it to you is so many times we sit in a place of feeling like it must be me. I must be the narcissist. I must be the bad person in all of this. You are not. Absolutely not. You never have been and you never will be. But by nature of what's happened to you in your childhood and your perceptions and those inner child wounds and your protector parts, you are receiving their projection of their pain in a certain way. And what we have to look at then is if we start to heal your inner child wounds, then you will receive their projection of their pain in a very different way, because narcissists never ever change. So I know my ex-husband, even now, has never ever changed. So why do I feel and why do I don't react at all anymore when actually he hasn't changed? Because he is now not triggering my core wound that was there of feeling not good enough, because I've worked on that really deep in my body. They are always going to be the same. And I know me even being like this, okay, is even more scary and triggering to my ex-husband. And I've done another video about this, about, the biggest gift you can give to yourself is heal. And actually, that's the biggest punch in the face to a narcissist. It really, really is. They don't want you to be healed. They don't want you to be confident. They don't want you living as your true self. They want you living as a protector part, serving the needs of their protector part, because then that will dial down how their inner child wounds feel and they can feel better about themselves. They'll feel less pain. But I don't want that for you. I don't want that for you in your life, because ultimately I want to help and support you really work on your own inner child wounds. But it is important for us to recognize that a narcissist will have a true self. They will have those childhood wounds and they will have their protector parts. The problem with a narcissist is, which is different from us, is we can never get beyond those protector parts to get to work on that inner child wound so that they can go back to stepping into who they are as their true self. Their pain runs so deep, and we don't know from a research perspective why. Why is it a codependent and a narcissist? Why is it we can work with codependency but not narcissism? You know, why? We don't know that. We actually don't know from a scientific research perspective, you know, why is that different? We know the brain can get wired differently. We know all of those elements, but we don't actually know how to recover narcissists, heal narcissists, because they will not acknowledge, there's no ownership and responsibility of the subjective distress that they exhibit and perpetrate onto people like yourself, people like me. They won't take ownership of that. So you actually can't work with someone who doesn't acknowledge that they're doing anything wrong. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't love to work with a load of narcissists and say, hey, look, there's childhood wounds. Let's work on that to get back to your true self. I'd love to do that if I could. But they won't say, there's nothing wrong with me. It's you. It's not me. You know, can you imagine saying to the narcissist in your life, hey, let's go to therapy or coaching and work on those inner child wounds? What do you think that they would say? Let me know in the comments below. So remember, narcissists are more fearful of you than you are of them, because you are the ones that can trigger really deeply their inner child wounds, just like their behavior triggers yours. The beauty of this is, though, you can heal yours because you can acknowledge it. And I hope that really, really helps you understand. We're not excusing abuse at all, but hopefully that will help you explain why the narcissist really fears you. Think about it from an internal family systems and trauma-informed lens. That sense of self, the childhood wounds, and then the protector parts. And narcissist as a word is not about a label for them. It's about us being able to acknowledge as survivors that it's not our fault, that it was a narcissist that has behaved like this towards us, not because of us or as a reflection of us, but the reason why we feel the way we do and end up staying in those relationships comes from our own past experiences and our own inner child wounds. That's where our power lies as well. So hopefully you enjoyed this. If you do, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit that bell so that you can absolutely join me again on the episodes again. Take care, lots of love. And remember, you can move from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth.